Charles Edmund Cullen is a name that remains relatively obscure, despite his horrifying acts of murder that spanned over 16 years. Often referred to as the Killer Nurse or the Angel of Death, Cullen was responsible for the deaths of potentially hundreds of patients across several hospitals in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. His method was as cold and calculated as it was insidious. He administered lethal doses of medications to his patients, killing them under the guise of medical treatment. The true extent of Cullen's killing spree remains unknown, as many deaths went undetected or were written off as natural causes. In this video, we will take a deep dive into the life, crimes, and psychology of Charles Cullen, exploring how he was able to exploit weaknesses in the healthcare system to carry out his deadly mission. Chapter 1. Early Life and Troubled Childhood. Charles Edmund Cullen was born on February 22, 1960, in West Orange, New Jersey. His childhood was marked by tragedy, dysfunction, and isolation. Cullen was the youngest of 8 children, and his early years were shaped by poverty and emotional neglect. His father, a bus driver, died when Charles was just 7 months old, leaving his mother to raise the family alone. Cullen's relationship with his mother, whom he idolized, was the only stable relationship in his life. However, his mother's sudden death in a car accident when he was 17 devastated him. It was a turning point that seemed to set him on the path to darkness. In interviews and confessions later in life, Cullen would often refer to his mother's death as a traumatic event that profoundly affected him. It's speculated that his deep sense of abandonment and grief may have fueled his future behavior. From a young age, Cullen displayed disturbing tendencies. He was frequently bullied at school due to his awkwardness, stutter, and unkempt appearance. He later claimed that he attempted suicide multiple times as a child, once by drinking chemicals from a chemistry set. These early attempts on his own life were the first signs of the severe mental health issues that would follow him into adulthood. Chapter 2. A Troubled Man Joins the Navy. After graduating high school, Cullen joined the U.S. Navy in 1978. For someone as emotionally fragile as Cullen, the rigid structure and harsh environment of the military proved to be a disastrous fit. Initially assigned to serve on the USS Woodrow Wilson, a ballistic missile submarine, Cullen's strange behavior soon caught the attention of his superiors. Cullen's time in the Navy was marked by several bizarre and troubling incidents. One of the most alarming episodes occurred when Cullen was found sitting in the missile control room, dressed in a surgical mask and gown. His colleagues were confused and disturbed by his behavior, but little action was taken beyond disciplinary measures. Cullen's mental health was deteriorating, and after repeated suicide attempts, he was medically discharged in 1984. Chapter 3. The Path to Nursing and the Start of His Killing Spree. After leaving the Navy, Cullen decided to pursue a career in healthcare, enrolling in the Mountainside Hospital School of Nursing. It was here that Cullen found a profession that suited his dark desires, a job where he had access to vulnerable people and the tools needed to end their lives without suspicion. In 1987, Cullen began working as a nurse at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey. His first known murder occurred just 1 year later. Cullen injected a lethal dose of intravenous medication into a patient, marking the beginning of a long and horrific killing spree. Over the next several years, Cullen worked at a variety of hospitals, moving frequently as suspicions about his actions began to surface. Cullen's method was simple, but terrifyingly effective. He administered fatal doses of insulin, digoxin, or epinephrine to his patients, drugs that, when given in excess, caused fatal heart attacks or irregular heart rhythms. Because these patients were often elderly or already in poor health, their deaths were usually written off as natural causes, allowing Cullen to continue his murders undetected. Chapter 4. Victims and Their Stories. One of the most tragic aspects of Cullen's crimes is the sheer number of lives lost, many of which were never formally identified as murder victims. While Cullen confessed to killing 40 people, investigators believe the true number could be well over 300, making him one of the deadliest serial killers in U.S. history. Case Study 1. The Death of Reverend Gall. One notable case was that of Reverend Florian Gall, an elderly man hospitalized for heart surgery at Somerset Medical Center in 2003. Reverend Gall had been recovering well, but without warning, his condition suddenly worsened, and he died. His death puzzled doctors, as there were no indications that he should have taken such a sudden turn for the worse. It wasn't until later that investigators discovered Cullen had administered a fatal dose of digoxin, a heart medication, to Reverend Gall. This case, along with others at Somerset, would ultimately lead to Cullen's downfall. Case Study 2. Helen Dean's Unsolved Death. In 1993, Cullen worked at Warren Hospital in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, where he murdered 91-year-old Helen Dean. She was admitted for breast cancer surgery and was on the path to recovery. However, Cullen entered her room, unassigned to her care, and injected her with a fatal dose of digoxin. Her son, who was present, reported seeing Cullen in the room, but hospital authorities dismissed his concerns. Dean's death would go unsolved for years, another victim lost to Cullen's hidden rampage, until he confessed in 2003. Case Study 3. Edward Ricciardi's Fatal Misstep. In 1998, at Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, Cullen claimed yet another victim, an elderly man named Edward Ricciardi. Cullen had slipped undetected into Ricciardi's room and injected him with a deadly cocktail of medications. The murder went unnoticed for years, with the death chalked up to the natural course of an aging patient's condition. Chapter 5. The Hospital's Deadly Silence. One of the most shocking aspects of Cullen's case is the number of hospitals that failed to act despite suspicions and red flags. Cullen would often leave hospitals before investigations could be launched, and instead of reporting him to authorities, hospitals quietly dismissed him to avoid lawsuits or damage to their reputations. St. Luke's Hospital, one of Cullen's employers, conducted an internal investigation after noticing a spike in patient deaths, but no action was taken. Cullen moved on to another hospital, each time leaving a trail of unexplained deaths in his wake. The lack of communication between hospitals, as well as the absence of a centralized system to track suspicious behavior, allowed Cullen to continue killing for over a decade. Chapter 6. The Role of Amy Luffren, the nurse who helped catch Cullen. Cullen's eventual capture in 2003 was largely due to the efforts of one brave nurse, Amy Luffren. Luffren worked with Cullen at Somerset Medical Center and grew suspicious of his behavior after noticing inconsistencies in patient records and his access to drugs. Luffren secretly worked with investigators, even wearing a wire during a conversation with Cullen, which ultimately helped secure the evidence needed to arrest him. Her courage and determination played a pivotal role in ending Cullen's reign of terror. Chapter 7. Arrest, Confession, and Trial. On December 12, 2003, Charles Cullen was finally arrested. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he confessed to killing at least 40 patients, though many believe the real number could be far higher. Cullen's calm demeanor during his confessions was chilling. He showed little remorse, and his motivations remained unclear. During his trial, Cullen claimed that he killed his patients to relieve them of suffering, though many of his victims were not terminally ill. In 2006, Cullen was sentenced to 18 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He remains incarcerated at New Jersey State Prison. Chapter 8. The Impact on the Healthcare System. Cullen's case exposed massive flaws in the healthcare system, particularly in how hospitals handle suspicious behavior among staff. In the wake of his arrest, there were widespread calls for reforms in hospital practices, including mandatory reporting of suspicious deaths and improved background checks for medical personnel. Laws such as the Cullen Law were introduced to create a national database that tracks healthcare workers with histories of misconduct, though many argue that more needs to be done to prevent similar cases in the future. Chapter 9. The Psychological Profile of a Killer Nurse. Psychologists have analyzed Cullen's behavior extensively, trying to understand what drove him to kill. Some have suggested that Cullen suffered from a personality disorder, while others point to his traumatic childhood and unresolved grief as possible factors. Unlike many serial killers who seek power or pleasure from their killings, Cullen's motivations seem to be rooted in his own psychological struggles. He often referred to his killings as mercy killings, though this claim is contradicted by the fact that many of his victims were not suffering or in pain. His lack of remorse and detachment from his actions suggest a deep-seated mental illness that manifested in unspeakable ways. Chapter 10 Conclusion. The story of Charles Cullen is a chilling reminder of how someone trusted to save lives can so easily betray that trust. Cullen's ability to continue killing for so long, undetected and unchallenged, raises serious questions about accountability in the medical field. His crimes have left a lasting scar on the families of his victims, and his case serves as a cautionary tale about the dark potential that can hide behind even the most trusted professions. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the dark and twisted story of Charles Cullen, the killer nurse. If you found this story thought-provoking and informative, please don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with others who might find it interesting. If you're new here, consider subscribing to Peaceful Stories for more gripping true crime stories and narratives from history. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And as always, feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts or suggestions on future cases you'd like me to cover. Your support means the world to me, and it helps keep this channel growing. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.